Go live. Hey friends, welcome to day 3 of the BFCM Prepathon with Cloudways. I am here with WooCommerce, Shopify, and BigCommerce experts, Zach Stepek. We are optimizing a WooCommerce shop live for you. But before we dive into this, and before I hand over to Zach, I want to point your attention to the pinned comment below this video, because you can win Amazon gift cards, you can win one-on-one consultancies, hosting credits, and a lot more with the giveaway that we have going on this day. So I am personally super excited, and I'm a little bit sad that I cannot enter myself, but everybody who's watching this can enter, of course. And Zach, I am super excited to learn from you today how we can optimize a WooCommerce store. So I'll bring up your screen.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
if you can set the stage for us, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and what we are about to learn, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I'm Zach Stepek, as was said earlier. I'm primarily a WooCommerce expert, but I've been working in e-commerce for over a decade now. And part of my introduction to WooCommerce was, WooCommerce performance was getting a call from my friend Noah on Thanksgiving during dinner with my family saying, "Help me, my site is down." And I had no clue where he was hosted, had no information about anything. And he said, we had this interview air during the football game between the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers. And it was you with Noah talking about his company. And they started the interview, and they got some orders coming in on their WooCommerce site, about 4 of them. And then they started getting a couple more very quickly. And when all of that happened, the site went down. And he didn't know how to restart the server that it was on. It was on a VPS that had been donated to them, which is awesome. Thank you for the donation. However, it couldn't handle the traffic, right? And so their site went down. At that time, that was the largest event that they had ever done. And they missed out on all of those sales because it took us 4 hours to find the password to reset the server. And once we reset the server, I looked at the configuration and figured out what had happened. And what had happened is that they had their email server hosted on the same box as their website. And as WooCommerce was starting to receive orders, it was filling the mail spool with new emails that had to be sent for all the new order notifications, both the administrative new order notifications and the receipt that was being sent to the customer. And so those emails filled the mail spool, ran the server out of memory, crashed the website, and deadlocked the server.
Dang. That's an expensive mistake to make.
It really was, unfortunately, especially for a company whose mission is that they reinvest 100% of their proceeds into a nonprofit they run to help injured veterans participate in adaptive sports.
Oh,
so that's the Oscar Mike Foundation. If anybody's feeling generous, they're great friends of mine and they do great work. Yeah, that was my first real introduction to what could go wrong with WooCommerce if you didn't have things configured well. And so that started an 18-month journey with them where I joined their staff within a week. And I worked with them to optimize their site over the course of, it was that probably 6 to 8 months that we worked. And we got it to a point where it was ready to go. And we were able to just keep it going and run a lot more volume than we had before. hundreds of checkouts at a time, which is great. I mean, that's good traffic for a WooCommerce site. Since then, I had started an agency that I'm no longer with. I left my agency in early 2020 thinking I was going to start something new at the beginning of 2020. And that didn't quite go as planned.
Great timing.
It really was, you just start something new in February, and then everything, in April started. Yeah, so it was just bad timing on my part. But I'm running my unagency now, called MightySwarm. Basically wanted a model that didn't require a whole bunch of employees. Allowed me to build teams around projects. And so that's why I started MightySwarm. And then I work at Cloudways as our Lightning team lead, on the tech lead on that side. So I'm a Lightning program manager. It's an agency program we use to help onboard agencies to our service. And we just we have a great time with helping agencies to run more efficient and effective businesses. So really great stuff. But yeah, what we're going to do today is we're going to actually dig into a real site. And when I say real, I mean, it's not some testing site that I designed just for this presentation and filled with a whole bunch of fake data. We're working with real data. So, I want to thank one of our Lightning customers, Ryan Lewis from, I believe it's Sundlife and Blossom Baby, for giving us a site to show today. We are in the process of doing some speed optimization on it now, so it was kind of the perfect time to dig in and look at some real things. So I'll go ahead and pull up the shop here for a minute. If we look here, this is the staging version of the site, so where it is currently. If I hit shop all, this is all running on an AWS server that's being managed through Cloudways. So I can click around to some of these different pages, and you see it's relatively quick, given the sheer number of things that we are seeing here. Tons and tons of products, and yeah, I'm very pleased with the speed that we're seeing now. Now I can go and load the live version of that site, and it's still pretty quick. It's it's not a slow site, but it's a little bit slower. I mean, it's barely noticeable. Well, it's barely there, but it's there. Yeah.
And that can make the difference between somebody buying from you and somebody getting annoyed while browsing around and abandoning the site.
Yeah, every 100 milliseconds, they say, is a 1% reduction in sales. So if you look at 100 milliseconds as a 1% reduction on, say, $1 million a year e-commerce site.
That's expensive, yeah.
It's what, $10,000 per 100 milliseconds? Is that math right? I think that's right.
I think it is.
So that's a lot of money. Yeah, if I could improve something by 100 milliseconds and make $10,000, I'd do that all day long. Wait, I kind of do. So, well, without the money.
That's your rate then. Okay.
Without the money side of it. But yeah, that's the whole point here, is to speed things up and get them to a point where they're even faster, right?
And especially with BFCM campaigns where you drive a ton of traffic to your website, you need your website to be up to speed.
Yeah, and so I know we have a session coming up. We actually have a lot of sessions today about performance, but we have a session coming up where the focus next is going to be on front-end optimization. So I'm not going to really focus there a lot, but we will talk about it a bit. But one of the things that we'll be looking at is backend performance. And in order to do that, we're going to use the integration that Cloudways has at the server level with New Relic. So if I go in and I manage my services here, we can see I have New Relic enabled. Actually, it's stopped here, but I can enable it just by going here, hitting enable, and it will enable New Relic on this account or on this server. So now
For everybody not familiar with it, what is New Relic?
So New Relic is and see, I don't have my license key entered, so it did not work, but New Relic is an application performance monitoring tool, and that's just part of it. So application performance monitoring uses something called a daemon. I know we're close to Halloween here, or All Hallows Eve, depending on what you want to call it. But we are using a daemon, not a demon, a daemon that sits on the server, receives data, and transfers it out to New Relic. Okay. And that data is about how the PHP application is actually performing. So we've seen that we have the Blossom Baby application on the front end that we've looked at. Let's look at how it's performing. So if I go to my summary here, this is my PHP application, and I can see my average web transaction times. And I can even look and see what layers are taking the most time. So I can see that PHP, Redis, MySQL, external web calls, and responses are all part of this stack that makes up the total transaction time for my site. So again, we're looking here at real data, which is really cool. So we can look at that. We can also look at database transactions. So it considers Redis and MySQL both to be databases because they technically are. So we're looking at Redis get, mget, set, and we're looking at all of these SQL queries. And we can see which SQL queries are slowest. We can even see what the average query time for these responses are. So we're looking at the most time consuming, and you'll see this site has been really far optimized already. There's not a single query that's running on this site since 30 minutes ago right now that takes more than a millisecond. So I'm sure if we drill out a little further, yeah, we'll see, some peaks, 1.45, 1.375 milliseconds. So heavily optimized on the data side already. We can also look at what external services it works with. So you can see, Afterpay, they're one of their payment gateways, Stripe. We can see the Facebook graph. We can see, the theme update server, AWS. We can see all of these various services that they interact with, Shippo, HubSpot. They have an integration with a pregnancy tracking site, which is kind of great for their niche. But you can see all these external services. You can see how much time they're taking. We can, say what's the slowest one, what one takes the most time generally. There we can see that that's Stripe. And we can see the throughput on these external applications, these external services, how long they're taking to respond. So that may be a performance bottleneck that we're looking at, right? We may, from this data, want to talk to Stripe and say, hey, you're our slowest external service. Is there anything we can do to optimize this connection?
So this is great for identifying the bottlenecks and potentially even getting rid of services or making sure they are only loaded on the pages where they need to be loaded. Like Stripe on the front end, for example, probably wouldn't make sense because there's no checkout functionality.
Yeah, exactly. One of the first optimizations that I normally do on a WooCommerce website is turning off all the WooCommerce scripts and styles on pages that aren't WooCommerce.
Right.
So we can look here under WordPress. New Relic understands WordPress. It's always great to have tools that understand the other tools you're using, right? And here we have the top 20 hooks. What's the most time consuming of our hooks? And we can also look by slowest average call time. So which ones are taking the most time to run? And this makes a lot of sense to me. That, generating a coupon from a CSV would take a while. Comments, okay. Comments are taking a while. We have WP All Export Pro. That seems like a process that should take some time with a nearly gigabyte database.
It's pretty quick for that. Like 1.1 seconds. It's
Yeah. Async request queue runners. Okay, so we're talking about some of the Ajax stuff that's happening, right? Order status pending to completed. That seems like a call that should take a little bit of time. There's a lot that happens in that, in that call. So we can look at the hooks that are taking the most time. We can also see which ones are being called the most frequently. And this is not surprising at all. Get text being the most called method or hook. But we can also drill further and we can look at individual plugins and themes. So we can see, let's go for slowest average call time. HubSpot for WooCommerce. Okay. So that's our slowest plugin right now. Its average call time is 7.11 milliseconds, and it's called 242,000 times since 7 days ago. Barcode printing. That's another one that gets called a lot. Okay. That means they're processing a lot of orders and printing a lot of barcode labels.
How do you identify which one to work on in these scenarios? Because they all seem pretty fast to me.
Yeah, so it's really looking at the largest offenders and then prioritizing based on what the most important functionality is. So, like in this case, looking at the barcode and label printing, I may consider, working with an external service and not doing anything with barcodes on the back end of WordPress. That may give me the speed up that I need. Use an external service, get rid of this entirely. And, that takes care of, on October 19th, 23 minutes of processing time. So
that's rather interesting.
Yeah. So just looking at what these, various pieces are doing, HubSpot for WooCommerce, obviously talking to HubSpot and bringing things in there. We can look at what the most time consuming is if the graph loads here. Sometimes they take a minute to load. There we go. And we can see, in the last 7 days, this has been just running a lot. It's not that any one call was really heavy. It's that they're all pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So we may look at ways to optimize that or to defer those calls until a time when there's less traffic. Or we may decide that we're better off building our own middleware for that, that particular external service, using something like a Laravel application and building our own API that throws that data out to our middleware and doesn't worry about how much resource it's taking to talk to the HubSpot, because that's no longer happening on WordPress. So that's a big piece for me, is finding the places where we can make improvements that remove things completely, and then finding ways to optimize the things that are already there, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we know Stripe's a pretty important function on this site, right? And I apologize. I enabled Do Not Disturb, and somebody still broke through it.
That's the fun of doing things live.
It is, you do things live and things just, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Okay, it had turned off somehow. Here we go. So we have, Stripe we're not going to be removing. We know that. Ninja Forms we're probably not going to be removing, because I really like Ninja Forms. It's a great form plugin. And we've already built everything there. We need the functionality. So, not going to get rid of those. 2022, when it's not being used as an active theme, that's Woostify that we're using there. So, don't know why that's sitting there at 3.65 milliseconds. That's something I would look into. Something's happening there where it's still running things. And then, some of these other things like Ultimate Elementor or Foo Sales, we may decide that these aren't as necessary as we think they are and decide just to eliminate them or reduce the amount that we're using them. So, and we can go way down the list here and see, okay, well, there's a lot here. I can see a table of all of them if I want. And I can sort by total time. And then, if I look here, I can actually go out further to get further data, just so that I have, the most data possible. So here I'm seeing FlatSum was enabled at one point.
Icons. Icons for the win.
Yep. And just a whole bunch of stuff here that, we can look at and see where these counts are. How many times are things being called? Like this Google listings and ads. That has been called a lot of times. That's 773,179,563 calls in the last 3 months. So
that is a lot.
That's a lot. Not as many as WooCommerce Ajax filters here, which is over 1.7 billion.
Okay, that's supposed to be expected on a WooCommerce site where you have filtering on the front end.
Yeah. Or if we look here, WooCommerce Smart Coupons, that's at what? 14.3 billion calls.
Yeah.
The child theme is at 23.3 billion calls. Facebook for WooCommerce, though, winning at 692 billion calls.
Holy smokes.
So, we can kind of get a picture here looking at New Relic at what we're wanting to optimize and where. And we can just, take a look at all of these averages, figure out what's the most time consuming. We can really dig in and see what's going on. So database operations, one thing I want to call out here is that if I load this table and I drill in further, I can actually see the SQL query that was called.
Nice.
Which is really interesting.
I do have one question from the audience, so that I would like to get your thoughts on before we dive into those SQL queries and lose ourselves. Everlearn unfortunately missed the start of the stream, and they want to know how we can get to the plugins overview in New Relic. So could you just walk us through how we bring that up?
Yeah, so when you start in New Relic, you have a list of all your services and hosts and things. Let's go to APM and services in the left menu. Open up the appropriate PHP application. Go to WordPress. And then you'll see hooks, and then you'll see plugins and themes. And you can sort by most time consuming, slowest average call time, or function call count. And then it just, because we're looking at 3 months of data, it takes a minute to bring that back. But it'll come back in just a moment here.
And then we're diving into the SQL queries.
Oh, we're having an issue fetching some data. So may have lost my connection there for a second. Here, let's go back. But yeah, that's how. Let's go back to databases. We'll just work in the last 24 hours. And it looks like, yep, here, if I go to my YN to no post select, so that's a select count distinct yes, no on no posts.id. So I can click on this and I can actually bring up a list of what that query looks like.
That's a beautiful query.
It really is. I mean, these joins are just they're at a pretty epic level of joins here. Yeah, and of course the question marks are the data that it can't really log, but everything else is pretty clear. You can see this is a beefy query.
Yeah. Everlearn also has a question. If you get this with the free New Relic that we get in the Cloudways subscription, or if we need a higher New Relic tier for this.
So the free New Relic account is all of New Relic. It's just limited on how much data you can ingest. So the biggest offender right now in data ingestion is distributed tracing, and that's something we can turn off because you generally don't need it in a single server environment. So that distributed tracing can be turned off, and that'll reduce your data ingest by like 90%.
Nice. That's a nice little hack.
Yeah, it's one of those little tips that if you weren't watching this, I'm sorry, you should probably have watched this.
Congrats on watching this and getting this tip then.
Congratulations to everybody here.
And Samir would like to know if New Relic somehow logs automatically, and we can get the 3 months of data even if it's only active right now, or if it just starts logging once we activate it.
I wish. So I've been doing my best to hide where this New Relic is attached to right now, but there have been some glimpses of where the site's currently hosted, and I'm sorry for that. But this is the live site. So this is where it's moving from, right? And that's what we're looking at in New Relic right now is 3 months of data from where the live site is living currently. So the staging site, we don't have any New Relic data yet. It's something we need to get connected. And as soon as we have that connected, we'll start building New Relic data again. But it can't really go back in logs and find things that servers generally don't log. A lot of these things just aren't things that the server logs ever. So yeah. So let's take a look just really quickly here at one of the things that we can do. A little trick for optimizing query volume. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Elasticpress and Elasticsearch, but Elasticsearch is a plugin, or Elasticpress is a plugin. Elasticsearch is a server. It's a server that makes search easier, but that's not all it does. So the Elasticpress plugin is very cool. It does things like post search. Cool. It does auto suggest as you type into a search field if it's configured correctly. It does faceted filtering. So you can add a facet widget that's powered by ElasticPress. It does custom search results where it'll insert specific posts into search results for specific queries, which is pretty crazy. You can actually choose to insert a post into a query and it will show up in the position you tell it to.
That's almost censorship.
Almost.
Wow.
But this plugin is developed by the folks over at 10up, and it's open source. So the plugin itself is free. Elastic, you can add to your server by going to your server configuration, going to settings and packages. And then under packages, there's a option for Elasticsearch. It'll start out as disabled, but you can add it to your server here. Now this is a single node Elasticsearch application. It's just one instance, right? A cluster is really the best way to run Elasticsearch, but this will work for most sites that are smaller. On a larger site, I'd recommend, using something like the elasticpress.io hosting that 10up offers for a clustered environment for that. But ElasticPress is really easy to configure. Once you configure it, it does a sync. So you can see this synced on Wednesday, October 19th at 17:39 server time. And it brought all of the data that it had for posts and for pages and for WooCommerce products into Elastic. Now, the thing that isn't normally talked about when it comes to the ElasticPress plugin is that it does this other thing that they don't publicize very well. It overrides every query that uses WP Query that it can. So if you have a really complex homepage with 100 queries happening that would be hitting your SQL server, most of those selects could probably be handled by Elastic and would be offloaded via ElasticPress to the Elastic server. So we were running without it a minute ago. Now we're running with it. And it seems even faster now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just quick. And,
You just earned them $10,000 then for 100 milliseconds.
At least. And so, that's just huge. Now, one of the reasons this site is coming over to us is because they have sales where new products will come in. And, they'll have a limited quantity of this new product. And the site will get hammered when the new product comes in because it's a new release and everybody wants it, right? And so one of the things that we're working toward is how many concurrent checkouts can we have? Now, the interesting thing about concurrent checkouts is how WooCommerce is currently architected. So when WooCommerce was forked from Gigashop, yes, I did say it was forked from another plugin, it was built in a way that fit the WordPress way, right? The WordPress way of doing things. And that is everything's a post type, right? It's a custom post type. Orders are a post type. Products are a post type. They're not stored in custom database tables. Now, this is normally great. It's normally fine until you get to a volume where you have millions of orders. Millions of orders in your posts table right alongside all your products, which you have thousands of or tens of thousands of. And they're living in that same posts table alongside all of your posts, which hopefully you're blogging regularly so that you have that content authority. And those are living right alongside your pages because they're all posts. And so
You're painting a really bright picture right here.
I am. This is the time of the presentation where we talk about the bleakness of running large-scale WooCommerce. That's the disclaimer. So
It fits in perfectly with the question that we just got about handling huge concurrent users in add to cart and checkouts. So we didn't stage this.
Perfect timing. No, we definitely didn't stage this. So yeah, it's kind of a thing. Yeah, where okay, when you insert an order, WordPress has this thing where you can't bulk insert post meta. And post meta is the data related to a post. Well, an order has 50 minimum pieces of post meta. Okay? 50. Now, because you can't bulk insert post meta, when you create a new order, it is adding 50 pieces of post meta by calling the add post meta method 50 times. Now, what?
So imagine this scenario then, where you have 50 or 60 concurrent checkouts at a time.
Let's talk about 50, because 50 times 50 is easy math, right?
2.5K, yeah.
Yeah, it's 2,500 pieces of post meta being added. Let's say that's concurrent checkouts per minute, okay? So 2,500 calls to this add post meta method. What do you think the add post meta method does? It calls a SQL insert. So for every order, it's calling SQL 50 times to create 50 separate inserts for 50 pieces of post meta. And remember, that's minimum without any additional plugins. Okay? So, bit of a problem. So how do we solve that? Well, we can't right now. We're getting there. So back in 2017, WooCommerce had released a version that included this thing called custom data stores. And custom data stores are really interesting in that they created what are called CRUD classes, create, retrieve, update, and delete classes. And, well, they're really methods. These CRUD methods, what they do, I say classes because they're each included in a class for each data type, okay? And what these methods do is they create, retrieve, update, or delete the data of that data type. So because they have these CRUD classes in place, they're called data stores in the documentation, you can override those data stores. The problem has been that if you override the data stores, nothing can call directly to try and retrieve post meta. It has to use the helper methods. So, and by nothing, I mean nothing that's touching WooCommerce data, right? So plugin developers were told about this in 2017. And I'm sorry, what year is it?
22.
Okay, so that's 5 years ago, right?
It's 5 years ago.
There are still plugin developers directly calling into post meta writing WooCommerce plugins.
So what's the fix then? Avoid those plugins?
Well, that's one way. But when this all first came out, it's funny because the WooCommerce team tried really hard to get these data stores into every part of the application. But even they missed some of them. Like reporting. The old reporting didn't use the data stores for a long time. So when you enabled a custom data store, reporting would just break. it just stopped working. So this is really the problem with building something as big as WooCommerce is, right? WooCommerce is an entire ecosystem built within WordPress. It's its own ecosystem. And in an ecosystem, there are things like this that happen. So the solution is the high performance order storage, HPOS, that is coming supposedly in WooCommerce 7.0. But the thing with high performance order storage is that there are 3 potential ways to configure this, right? One, and this is the default right now, is that it mirrors the data to posts like it does currently and adds it to a custom table. And this is great because it maintains backward compatibility. But the problem with that is that backward compatibility means it's still inserting 50 pieces of post meta with every order. So you really have to make a decision here, right? If you want to make a break with where you're currently at and make a breaking change when 7.0 comes out that you can't reverse, then move to the high performance orders storage. And what this does is it creates a custom table that stores orders. So instead of 50 calls, I believe it's down to 3.
Nice.
So that's a huge change. And of course, some plugins will still want to add post meta, and that's fine. There are ways for that to still work as long as they're using the helper methods. And so if you listen to my podcast episodes on Do the Woo, I've been rather adamant about this lately. I run the Woo dev chats with Till and Carl. Till is the creator of Redis Object Cache and Object Cache Pro. Carl Alexander is the founder of Emir. It's nerdy and it's great. And if you want to learn more about deep performance things with WooCommerce, that's a great place to start. So yeah,
great shout out.
Thank you.
We've got like 10 minutes roughly, just as a timer right here. So everybody who has more questions, shoot them at us while we are here.
Absolutely. So the solution, you asked what the solution is. The solution is high performance order storage. It's just not fully baked yet and it's not ready. That's been a huge problem getting all these plugins updated to use the data stores properly.
And probably a workaround would be to custom code something that uses it.
Yeah. So back at my former agency, we actually worked with Liquid Web at one time to create a custom order tables plugin that's still being maintained, but it's being replaced basically with the solution that the WooCommerce team is working on.
Yeah.
So Elementor and WPML slowing down the site, especially WPML. Okay, so Elementor, you can really tune Elementor to where it's not having as large of an impact. There are some plugins that you can use. First of all, I don't know if you're familiar with our Breeze plugin, but Breeze configures caching on the front end and on the back end for Cloudways. It's built for our platform. So one of the things you can look at here is file optimization, minifying your HTML, minifying your CSS, minifying your JavaScript. The important things here is that there are exclusion text boxes here. If something breaks, add an exclusion for it. That should fix it. That will also remove the optimization, but it will fix the problem. So minifying and concatenating CSS can cause things to break at times. Minifying and concatenating JavaScript. Concatenating is this combine option here. Merges it all into a single file. This used to matter a lot more than it does now, the concatenation, because back in the days of HTTP 1, back when I used to have to walk uphill both ways to build a website, back in those days, we could only download, I believe it was 4 resources from a server at a time. Now, it's as many as the browser can allow under HTTP 2, and now we're entering an era with HTTP 3 where even more connections can be opened at once, because as broadband has proliferated in a lot of areas, it's become easier to do that. So concatenation, not as important these days. Still helpful in some cases. Things like preload. If you have web fonts, preload them. Oh, another tip, don't serve your web fonts from an external service. Even if you're using Google Fonts, copy them locally. It's way faster.
Also easier for GDPR.
It is. It is a GDPR violation, actually, to host your fonts on Google. So bring them in, host them locally. Tuning things like the Heartbeat API. You know, how quickly does the heartbeat happen? Does heartbeat happen on the front end? And this, when you control the heartbeat, can actually help to reduce the number of calls that are happening, right? So the heartbeat normally runs once every minute, I believe. And so if you can reduce that to once every 5 minutes and still have a stable site that does what you need it to do that. It's just anything you can do to reduce the load on your server. Database, huge performance, performance hog, for lack of a better term, if you don't keep things optimized. The settings tab is taking time to load. Using a content delivery network. Okay.
I see why the settings tab is taking its time.
68,453 duplicated post metadata. Okay, that's a lot. And we're in a staging site, so if I wanted to just obliterate this, I could.
Can you go over the differences between Breeze, Varnish, and Object Cache in like a minute before we come to a close?
Yeah, so Breeze configures Varnish in our stack. So this cache system thing here, that's basically saying use our Varnish stack to cache pages. Now, this allows Breeze to control these settings, right? Object caching is done through Object Cache Pro if you have a Cloudways account. We include Object Cache Pro for free. Normally, I believe it's $100 a month or somewhere around there. And Object Cache Pro handles Redis. Redis is object caching. So Varnish is page caching. It caches the result of PHP generating a page. Object caching caches the result of a query from the database. So these two layers work together. They work in concert to make sure that no matter what, everything is cached. And then soon, with our Cloudflare Enterprise integration, we'll be enabling full page caching on the Cloudflare Edge as well, which will speed things up even more. So looking at that functionality on your applications, if you are in your application and you go to Cloudflare and you have it enabled, I believe I'm on this one. Yep, if you have it enabled, you'll see your domain here, what bandwidth you're using, what status you're at, and it tells you, you get this enterprise CDN, content delivery networks, move your static assets to the edge, which is a server on Cloudflare's network that's closer to your users. The web application firewall, DDoS protection, And then mobile and image optimization and broadly compression all are enabled with Cloudflare Enterprise. It's $5 a month per domain.
Super cheap, yeah.
That's normally, I believe, call for price on their website.
I've heard quotes around 5K per month, yeah.
Yeah. Call for price basically says, yeah, this is going to be expensive, right? But we have pricing directly with them, and that $5 a month goes down depending on the number of domains you have with us, where when you have more than 25 domains, it's only $1.99 per domain for something that is normally north of $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Sometimes closer, yes, to that $5,000 a month mark.
And does that make sense when we only serve customers in one country and the Cloudways server is already located there?
Yes, it still does. Just simply because their other functionality, the web application firewall, the image optimization they do that optimizes for the size the image is being served on the device that it's being served to. Really huge. The mobile optimization, huge. I mean, and DDoS protection. If you're running an e-commerce site where you're doing flash sales, the last thing you want is some bad actor to come in and say, hey, I'm going to DDoS your site in the middle of your giant sale.
Talk about competitors, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, perfect. I think that is a fantastic way to wrap up this conversation. Friends, again, check the pinned comment or the first comment if you're on YouTube, because we have some exciting giveaways that are going for you. You can just enter by sharing your best takeaway from this session and win Amazon gift cards, one-on-one consultancy, Cloudways hosting credits, and a lot more. And Zach, what final words do you have on this BFCM Prepathon? How did you enjoy the experience overall?
Oh, it's been great. I've loved watching all of the sessions so far, and it's been really interesting. You know, even as somebody who's been in this space for as long as I have, I'm still learning. There is always something new to learn, and I'm just really appreciative of the other people who've been participants. And I'm really looking forward to judging the WooCommerce Speed Up Hackathon that we're doing. So I'll be judging that. If you want to try and see if you can be the best at performance optimization, really great way to get in there and try what I just showed you.
100%. And starting in about 7 minutes, we have Tom Dupois, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, from Online Media Masters, speaking about scoring 100% in the Google Page Speed Insights. Super, super important topic. As you said, it's front-end optimization. This session was focused on back-end. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Obviously, Zach and I will go through the comments and make sure we respond to everyone on Facebook, on YouTube, and so on. And I'm wishing you all the best of fun with the session with Tom in a few minutes. Thanks for being with us today.